name's Cara. I am your host for Tuesdays here on the Pagan Perspective, and this week, if you don't mind, I'm going to be recording my video while I make soup for my partner who is not feeling well. If you do mind, I'm going to do it anyway. Maybe just listen to the video. I don't know. Proceed as you will. This is also going to be a direct upload with no editing because technology issues are my life, and it's Mercury retrograde. So, if you believe that that could be making them worse somehow, it definitely is. So, alright. Give me 1 second. I need to add more veggie broth. Making vegetable soup. So this week, we are talking about our opinions on, or our views on, the urban lifestyle and what that has to do. That phrase just makes me laugh, the urban lifestyle. And what kind of relationship cities can have with paganism. And the questioner this week specifically mentioned, for example, as people are moving more and more towards shared living situations, what kind of relationship do we think there can be between cities and paganism? So, I'm not an expert on urban development and gentrification and things like that. My partner could actually tell you way more about that, since they were a environmental activist and social activist for years. They know way more about that stuff than I do. I'm very interested in it. I'm just not very well versed right now, so I won't pretend to be. So what I want to talk about in this video is just the relationship between paganism, which is frequently thought of as an earth-based or a nature-based path, and therefore what relationship pagans today can possibly have with cities. Okay? So, to begin with, a lot of you know where I grew up, where I lived for a long time, because you've seen my videos from years and years ago on my personal channel and on this channel, Pagan Perspective. So you know, I used to do a lot of videos walking around in the woods and walking around the neighborhood where I lived, which was very wooded and nestled between multiple small lakes and things like this. So I had nature right outside my window. You may or may not know, I definitely told my Patreon sponsors this first, and I think I have mentioned it on at least my personal channel, if not here. So you may or may not know already that I actually now live in the city. I'm a country mouse who moved to the city. My partner also is originally a country mouse, but lived in the city and in various cities around the world for years. And so they are very comfortable in the city. And I was having some financial issues living where I did, being able to afford that apartment. So we decided that with our lifestyles, both of us are vegan. I'm making vegetable soup tonight. Both of us are vegan. Both of us are pagan. Both of us identify as creative people of one kind or another. Artists, healers, musicians, singers, all of these things. So we thought the city will have so many more opportunities for us for the things that we want to do to support ourselves and the kinds of things that we want to be around and be involved in. So for me, specifically, that city is Cleveland, Ohio. I have always lived on the outskirts of Cleveland, except like when I went to college, I lived a little further away, but I've always generally lived in the Cleveland area. So that's how I used to tell people I live in Northeast Ohio, I live in the Cleveland area, but not in Cleveland. Now I live in Cleveland. And so, yeah, where do I want to start? So there's this stereotype, right, that since pagans are mostly known as being nature-based, earth-centered practitioners, paths, all of this, we follow the cycles of nature, many of us, although there are some pagans who do not consider themselves to have a nature-based path. And so that's one stereotype that we can debunk. While many pagans, if not most, I don't have the exact statistics, I don't know, while many pagans are nature-based and earth-centered, and our celebrations are based on the solar cycle and the lunar cycle, and we celebrate the seasons, and all of these things. There are some pagans who don't identify as being nature-based. They identify as being more focused on something else. So the most common one that I've heard is that some people who are not nature-based consider themselves to have a deity-based path. So their path is based on the deity or deities that they follow, that they worship. And they may or may not celebrate the solar calendar, the wheel of the year. May or may not do that. So that's one stereotype, right? But if we accept, for the purposes of discussion, the stereotype that pagans are nature-based, earth-centered, blah, people, then it follows that a lot of people think you can't possibly be pagan, or you can't possibly get a lot out of being a pagan in a city, because cities are concrete jungles, right? There's no nature there. It's all man-made, steel and glass, and well, especially steel in Cleveland, famous for that, and different forms of, just gas-guzzling transportation, polluting, enormously tall office buildings, cubicles that are, crammed together. People who work in them are crammed together, and yeah, there's just this image, right, that people have of cities. And I grew up in a rural area, in the country, so to speak. It wasn't suburbs. I guess we considered it rural. I would say I grew up in farm country. I did not live on a farm, but I definitely went to school with kids who lived on farms. And there's a lot of them. If you were to drive through the general area that I lived in, it's very much Amish country. Amish country, farm country. As opposed to where my brother lived with his father, and I lived there with them for a while, and I have some videos from that time of my life too. I lived with my brother and his dad for a while. They lived in the woods. The nearest gas station was 20 minutes away in the woods. That is the most country I've ever lived in. And oh my gosh, was it so nice to be there and to have that very secluded feel. Literally we lived in a log cabin that his dad built. And yeah, it was beautiful to be able to just step outside and feel enclosed and embraced by the natural world. It's a beautiful feeling. And even where I grew up, there was always a lot of woods. And so my path personally is very connected to the woods and trees and rocks and moss and all these things. However, the more I visit different city-like areas and the more I explore my own city here that I'm living in now, there's so much opportunity to connect to nature. And not just in the very obvious ways where there are large expanses of cities that are set aside as parks, for example, because those do exist. There are areas like that in cities, and they may not be immediately downtown. But even if you go downtown, there are lots of little squares and areas that are set aside as green space, and there are trees planted there. Even if it's a concrete, just a full-on parking lot, that's not concrete, that's asphalt, whatever, terms. Even if there's just a full-on parking lot, and then there's a sidewalk, and then there's the road, however many lanes it is, and you're in downtown, there's, between the sidewalk and that parking lot, there could be a row of trees. And you might think, all right, well, there's no grass. It's not a forest. No, those trees were planted there specifically. Yeah, they're there partially for looks. Hopefully also because people understand that they create oxygen. And if you don't have any plants in a city, that is polluting a lot because all of the traffic, whatnot, it'll be a little unbalanced if you don't also have trees. So hopefully people also know that. But yeah, they're there for looks partly. But yeah, I had some interesting experiences my first couple times coming and walking around the city and just trying to get to know the city before we moved here. The first time I had this idea that the trees and the plants that live here, they must be miserable. right? I don't know why I thought this, but that's what I thought as I was walking around. And so I just felt like sending some love to all of the nature that I saw as I walked by. And I did that, and that was fine. The second time we walked through the same area and I saw those same trees, I almost wanted to do the same thing, but then I realized, wait a second, no. Like, why am I imposing my human thoughts and ideals on how these trees feel? No. How about shut up, self, conscious mind? How about feel into what's actually happening here? So I walked down the same street, and as we passed by every tree, I reached out energetically to just kind of tap into and like say hello and be like, hey tree, what's up? How you feeling? And I learned that the trees are not nearly as sad as I thought they would be in my silly mind of stereotypes about how the city is not nature. Like, there's nature everywhere in the city, and I have every opportunity to reach out and touch it, even if I am walking downtown and it's a few bushes. That's nature. That's thriving there. They are thriving in the environment that they've been given, and they give a little touch of the world beyond those skyscrapers to the people who are living there, because the people going to and fro, they might love it. You know, some people love the city. Some people are there because they have to be, because their job's there, and maybe that one little green bush is like the happiest thing for them all day when they go and take their lunch break and have their coffee next to that plant, you know. The other big point that I'd like to make, though, that I have talked about in the past in videos, I'm going to forget his name now. There's an author who talked about this. I talked about him in one of my Vlog Every Day in April videos years ago. It's the 4th video of whatever year it was of April. David, can't remember his last name right now. But he talked about how wherever we are on the planet, whether we're in a forest, in a park, at the beach, in the city, on the top floor of a skyscraper, we are always in relation to nature. That we are not suddenly outside of nature because you've stepped onto an asphalt block, right? Nature is not just where the trees and the rocks are wild, you know? And sometimes nature is concocted by man. Sometimes things are landscaped to look a certain way. Does that mean it's not nature? Because, as others all around YouTube have pointed out, I'm specifically thinking of a Katie Flowers video that I watched recently. I watched a lot of Katie Flowers and Danny's videos recently, so I could be confusing them, but I think it was one of Katie's videos where she talked about thinking about human nature and that human beings are part of nature. We exist as a part of this whole puzzle, so things that are man-made are not automatically outside of nature because they were created by us instead of naturally formed from the earth. We think of them as different things, but they don't have to be completely separate things because we are part of nature, we are connected to nature, and so therefore the things that we create can be done naturally, either with natural materials or in various ways can be thought of as part of nature. Maybe once removed, but we can start to think of them in different ways. I just want to check my time here, make sure I'm not going to run out of space on the camera. Should be okay. So, yeah, there's just this stereotype that the cities can have nothing to do with nature and that paganism is impossible in the cities. So that covers the nature aspect of it. As far as just paganism in the city and what kind of relationship I think that can have, well, Cleveland area Pagan Pride Days is the biggest event that I've been going to for years now. It takes place in Bedford, Ohio, which is not directly in like the downtown area of the city, but it's considered part of Cleveland, and so the Cleveland Pagan Pride is held there in a park. It's held in a little like public square park. It's a little area of greenery, and Yeah, so the thing that I'll say about that, about paganism in cities, as far as my relationship with that event and how I came to be closer to Cleveland through that event, is that cities can provide a lot of opportunity for people to get together that may or may not be able to happen in other areas. Now, on the one hand, if you have a lot of pagan friends and you all live in rural areas, then yeah, I'm sure somebody has like a really huge backyard, which is like paths that go into the woods. You have tons of privacy. You can go and have your group gatherings there, right? Your Sabbath celebrations and things like that. Awesome. But I find that what happens with a lot of people is that you don't necessarily have pagan friends who live out there, or you do, but because you all live out in the country, you all live like an hour's drive away from each other. And depending on the weather and the road conditions and everything like that, sometimes it's not as convenient to be able to travel from one place to another in rural areas that are very nature-y. So it can be harder to get together. Cities, I feel like, because people are so much closer together and there are so many more people in a smaller area and tend to be a lot more diversity of beliefs and things that people are into, I meet a lot of people in the city just in passing who it's very clear to me either are pagan or witches, or they know so many people who are that they are immediately accepting of it. When they hear that I identify with these communities, they don't bat an eyelash, right? They're telling me about their friends who are pagan and, oh, you should go check out this drum circle that they go to. And things like that, right? There's a lot more opportunity for you to hear of just like a concert venue where bands come to play on tour when they pass through Cleveland, that the rest of the week is doing poetry slams and, you know, open mics and drum circles. And a lot of the people who tend to show up at things like drum circles are either people who identify as pagan, or they don't identify as such, but they're very much our people, if you know what I mean. They have, you know, they have this idea, they have concepts of energy, right? So they might not identify as pagans, but they're people who understand how energy works and how music connects people. And yeah, so there's a ton of opportunity for stuff like that. You just find out like there's a bunch of these events happening, and there's pretty much always something going on in the city at any given moment. And yeah, and there are areas where you can definitely go out and be in nature. And now that, okay, so this has been hard because it's Cleveland, because it's Northeast Ohio, because we're so close to Lake Erie, whatever. The weather gets crazy, and so this fall and winter, and even so far into the very little beginnings of spring we have here, have been frigidly cold, and we've had some snowstorms, and like today it was just absolutely downpour, raining all day. Although I did walk a little bit in the rain today because I needed it. I've been feeling a little stuffed up, so there is that aspect. At my old place, even though I would stay inside on a, you know, bad weather day, I had a nice big sliding glass window that looked out onto a green lawn, and I could look out and see the moon whenever I wanted. It was always, you know, to the south. I had a south-facing window. I felt much more able to be connected from inside my apartment. Whereas here, it's very enclosed. This is like a townhouse style situation, and we had to put plastic over the windows because it's so cold, and so I can't reach all of the blinds to open it up to get some light in here. I can in my front window above my altar, and that has been so important to me lately. I want to get some sunlight in here, and so like, yeah, today I had to go for a walk even though it was raining because I just wanted to get outside and breathe the air and feel the rain and just be outside, feel that breeze, right? So it might be different ways that we connect to nature and to the cycles of nature when in a city, especially if we're used to connecting to them in the woods, you know, where it seems so obvious. We might have to be a little more creative. We might have to seek it out a little bit more to find those cute little secret areas in these urban neighborhoods where there's a little garden with a bench and like wild growing lavender and rosemary, or like, obviously, you know, somebody planted it at some point, but like, it just grows there. And it's like, wow, this is such a cool little place that like you would never think to find those. And you really have to walk around and like boots on the ground, like get out there and connect with the earth in this new place in order to find these things. But then, yeah, I feel like there are some great opportunities because there are so many more people and it can be more diverse. People know about things. People are much more likely, if you walk up to someone and say like, hey, do you know of anything like, do you know of any stores around here where I could buy crystals and oils and incense? Because I actually found one of those. It's definitely not anything that would be labeled as a witchy shop or anything like that. Like, we walked into this place thinking it was going to be like some kitschy themed, like, just weird stuff store. And they turned out to have like a ton of crystals and oils and incense and stuff that you would find in a metaphysical shop. So like, there's just secrets everywhere in the city. So yeah, that has been my relationship so far, being a country mouse and a country witch, newly living in the city. Now that, that's what I was about to say, now that the weather is breaking, we're entering spring, it's going to get warmer outside, I will be able to start walking around more on a daily basis without freezing my butt off. And I'll be able to record some of these wonderful little places that I'm finding in the city and prove to you that nature exists here too. And it's perfectly possible to have a fantastic relationship as a pagan with the city. So yeah, that's my perspective. That's my perspective. We don't need to add that as a tag on these videos. I think people get it. We're pagans and these are our perspectives. Thank you for watching The Pagan Perspective. I'll see you next week. Thanks so much for this topic. I think it was a fun one. I'm going to finish dinner now. I'll see you next time. Blessed be. Don't forget to be awesome. And goodbye.